Bible begins and ends with battles between Babylon and Israel, the nation formed by Abraham's descendants. In the first battle, recorded in Genesis 14, Abraham is the hero, valiantly rescuing his nephew Lot and the other inhabitants of Sodom, who had been taken captive by the 4 kings from the region of Babylon. In the last battle, Yeshua is the hero, destroying the city of Babylon, the empire associated with it, and all of its allies. Revelation 19:19 and 20. And I saw the beast, the kings of the earth, and their armies gathered together to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. Then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet, who worked signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These two were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. The entire Bible after the flood is bookmarked by these 2 battles. It just so happens that this conflict is recreated many times in the Bible. The book of Revelation tells us how many times the empire of Babylon is recreated to become the adversary of those living in the promised land. Revelation 17:9 through 11. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. And the beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th, and is of the 7, and is going to perdition. In the opening verses of this chapter, a woman identified as Babylon is sitting on a beast with 7 heads. This beast, which carries Babylon, has 7 kings. Over the centuries, Babylon has had many more than 7 or 8 kings. So, what is meant by 7 kings? A king is the ruler over an empire or a kingdom. In Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the statue representing successive kingdoms, the head was both Nebuchadnezzar and the kingdom over which he ruled. Daniel 2:37 and 39. You, O king, are a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. But after you shall rise another kingdom inferior to yours, then another a 3rd kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. Daniel describes successive kingdoms that rose after the current Babylonian kingdom. Daniel didn't refer to any of the kings who ruled Babylon before or after Nebuchadnezzar. It was as if Nebuchadnezzar was the kingdom of Babylon. If we apply this same thinking to the kings of Revelation 17 as being kingdoms of Babylon, what does the Bible reveal? We see that at the time that John wrote the book of Revelation, there had already been 5 kingdoms, and they were in the 6th kingdom. The 7th kingdom had yet to arrive, and the 8th kingdom would be ruled over by the beast. The 5th kingdom, the kingdom that ruled over Israel at the time of John, was the Roman Empire. Although it was centered in Rome, it included the region of Babylon. Was the Roman Empire the 5th kingdom, which included the Babylonian region, that ruled over all or part of the Promised Land? As we go through the Bible, we find that this is indeed the case. The first altercation with Babylon involved 4 kings conquering and taking tribute from the kings of the plain near the current Dead Sea. So yes, the first kingdom of Babylon ruled over part of the Promised Land. The next kingdom to rise up was the Assyrian Kingdom. In the time of Kings Ahaz and Hezekiah, the Assyrian Empire attacked and took control of all of the northern kingdom of Israel and much of the southern kingdom of Judah. Only a miraculous act of God delivered Judah from the hand of the Assyrian king. The 3rd kingdom to rise up was our familiar Babylonian kingdom, of which Nebuchadnezzar is the most well-known king. Babylon conquered all of the Promised Land and took the inhabitants into captivity. The 4th kingdom was the Persian kingdom, whose famous King Cyrus commanded that the temple in Jerusalem be rebuilt without releasing his own sovereignty over the Promised Land. The sixth kingdom was the Greek Seleucid kingdom founded by Alexander the Great and divided into 4 parts at his death. 2 of the offshoot kingdoms, the Ptolemaic and the Seleucid, exchanged sovereignty over the Promised Land until the rise of Rome, the Sixth Empire. The Roman Empire ruled over Israel until its near total dispersion and destruction in the 2nd century. At that point, Israel as a nation ceased to exist. However, occupation of the land continued. The Roman Empire eventually split into a western and eastern part. The eastern part, renamed the Byzantine Empire, continued to rule over the desolate land of Israel until the Byzantine Empire was conquered by the rise of the Muslim nations. The Muslim Empire was radically different from its predecessors, marked by internal strife, ever-changing boundaries, and an unstable alliance of kings. It ruled over Israel until the Promised Land was freed by the Allied nations in World War I. This in turn gave rebirth to the nation of Israel. This 7th empire, and the last before the empire of the beast rises, still rules over Babylon and the surrounding region. Through the Islamic nations, it now rules over a good portion of the world. However, John assures us that its rule will be short. The patterns established from the previous empires reveal how this empire will fall. How close are we to seeing this event? What miracles can we expect to see as God protects Israel? What will the rise of the empire of the beast look like? Get the full story and more in our book Babylon Rising, as we examine what these empires of Babylon and their interaction with the descendants of Abraham through the centuries can tell us about the empire of the beast and the final confrontation between Babylon and Israel.